Hello, this is Conor Ruebusch. You may know me from the show you're about to listen to. I'm the host of Heavy Hands. I just wanted to warn you in advance that the upcoming interview with Brian Stann, that's the first segment on today's episode, has a couple of audio issues that unfortunately we couldn't resolve. We did our best. The interview is still fantastic. Brian is one of the most insightful guys in the sport, always worth listening to him. But I just wanted to tip you off. There are a couple of fizzes and pops in there, so that way you're not too put off by it. I do encourage you to listen because, again, Brian is definitely worth listening to. And we will see you at the other end of the interview with a breakdown of Robbie Lawler versus Tyron Woodley. I'm Conor Ruebusch, and if you are interested in the finer points of face punching, you've come to the right place. This is Heavy Hands. Hello and welcome to another episode of Heavy Hands. I am your host, Conor Ruebusch, joined here by my intrepid co-host, Dr. Patrick Wyman, and today we are delighted to bring you an interview and analyst segment featuring, well, I'll start off with this comment. We're here with Brian Stann, and Brian, John Anik has taken to calling you the greatest living American. Is that, I noticed that when he says that, nobody in the room laughs. Is that something that you approve of, or how do you feel about that remark?
You know, he's not going to stop doing it just because he knows I don't like it. He's going to keep, it's 50%, us being great friends and him liking me, and then 50% like, hey, I know this kind of gets you to blush, so I'm going to keep doing it.
Well, so, I mean, it's kind of indicative of the fact you guys have been working together for a couple of years now. Do you find with having that kind of rapport with each other, it's easier to prep and call a show together now than it was a few years ago?
Oh, it's massively easier. It's so much better, and he knows me so well. He knows how to bring the best out of me. He knows when he touches on certain points, it's going to get me to go into a good breakdown. He knows my notes and knows the stories that we both agreed, hey, we want to get this story out. So he's the key to all of that. Bilal Muhammad, who, I had found out trained through Ramadan for his fight against Alan Jouban. John's going to know that I was able to find some of that information. He's going to tee me up to get that kind of stuff out. And it's so important, and you can get just such a great rhythm. And the thing is, the tough part is for John, John's got to be able to do that with multiple people. He's going to call fights with me, then he's going to call fights with Kenny. He's going to do desk shows with totally different analysts. He's such a pro. He does shows with Sean Shelby and Joe Silva, pulls great things out of them. I mean, he's such a pro that he knows how to get all that stuff, and it's because of his preparation. The guy prepares so hard. He'll spend over an hour on every individual fighter.
Wow.
That's unbelievable to be able to put that much into it. So kind of segueing from that, it seems like you guys had an incredible amount to prepare for over the last couple of weeks. You had I think the two of you, you and John, called 24 fights during International Fight Week. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, we did the Fight Pass card, and then we did the Tough Finale card as well, and it was a lot. It was a bear. And the hardest part of it was actually the fact that we had a significant amount of both of those cards had fighters that don't live in the U.S., which makes it a little bit more difficult to prepare, because for me, I like to speak to every single athlete before I call their fights, which is just not easy in this sport. And especially when they live in a different country, then I've got to go find a translator. In some cases, I can get a hold of them through WhatsApp, and I can Skype with them at a time that's, convenient for them, which is obviously going to be middle of the night for me, and that's fine. As long as we can have somebody who can translate, we can communicate clearly. It's just not easy. And so that's one of the difficult parts, on top of obviously watching all the film and all the footage that you understand and you can best represent these athletes and their fighting styles. But also their growth, where they're going, what's their trajectory, how much better have they gotten? The fans deserve to know that and hear about that, and the athletes, they especially deserve us to be prepared to do that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So on that note, you mentioned their kind of growth and development. Do you have kind of in your head an idea of what the learning curve should look like for a fighter from fight to fight?
I do. I think there should be a certain level of advancements depending on the pace at which they're fighting. Sometimes you get uh, guys that'll come in and they fight a little bit too often, too early when they're not really ready for that type of thing. Other fighters will pace it out really well, but then it also depends on their trainers. We're at a time where the sport's really grown quite a bit, and you can get athletes that start their careers off in really good gyms with good quality trainers where they're always going to get a lot of good new information. And then other ones, you get folks from really, really small camps that are trying to cling and hold on to that athlete, and they're not going to get as much new information. They may not get as much growth. Sometimes they also surprise you. Sometimes these smaller gyms are doing a lot of great things, and they're underrated. So it varies each time, but you should see a good amount of growth from athlete, each year. Not always fight to fight, but each year you should. If you're not seeing that, chances are they're just not going to stick around the UFC.
So, Brian, you mentioned that you like to interview every single fighter, which is obviously crazy and an insane amount of work. And I was actually going to ask you about that because it seems that when you're calling fights, you seem to have a little tidbit of information that you've gleaned from a pre-fight interview on just about everyone that you're talking about. But I am curious to know what kinds of questions you ask them. What kind of things do you try to find out that you think will be valuable for your call?
Yeah, well, there's obviously a set of standard questions that any analyst is going to ask. How about their training, about what they want to get done in this fight. Where do you feel like you're improving the most? Where do you need to improve? Things
Mm-hmm.
like that. No doubt about it. But other athletes, they may have a more unique background, and I want to talk about that because it's my job to help these men and women become stars. It's
Mm-hmm.
not my job to be a star. People don't even see me; they just hear my voice. It's not about me; it's about them. And so there are certain fighters where you can all of a sudden figure out, like, wow, wait a minute, this is your background. Well, boy, this story needs to be told. This is really interesting to me. And I mentioned Bilal Muhammad. That's interesting. A guy gets an opportunity to make his UFC debut, something he's waited for forever. A lot of fighters do not compete during Ramadan, but because he had to make his debut and he wanted this opportunity, he chose, hey, you know what? I'm going to compete. I'm going to train through Ramadan and then fight, which, you guys have done a lot of training yourselves. Imagine training on an empty stomach all day where you're not eating or drinking a thing. You're fasting all day. That's a really, really tough thing to do, trying to cram in training sessions at night after you've
Yeah.
gotten some food in your body. But that's something that sticks with people. People are going to remember that about this athlete. He may have lost his debut, but he lost to a great guy in Alan Jouban who has his own very unique story. Hopefully, when people heard me call that fight, there were a number of fans who say, hey, you know what? Anytime this Jouban guy or this Muhammad guy fight, I want to watch. I want to follow this fighter, and I want to keep watching this UFC thing because these athletes are really unique.
So it sounds like that Joban Muhammad fight was one of the ones that really stuck out to you from that week. Were there any others from of those 24 fights that you called that really stuck in your head as this was an awesome fight? There were really great things happening here. Like what stood out to you?
Oh, no doubt. The Joanna Jedrzejczyk Claudia Gadelha fight was the fight that sticks out to me the best from that weekend. It's one of those ones where, being a color commentator, it's an amazing experience to see a fight where you've got this many momentum shifts. You have so much technique. I could call that fight 4 times in a row and not be able to pick out all the different technical aspects of it. Uh, on top of just the inner workings of each fighter, what they had to go through. Claudia knew her game plan was going to take a ton of energy, and she knew she was going to have to push herself harder than ever before, and she came so close to doing enough to taking that belt. At the same time, Joanna knew in that second round, I just got to last a little bit longer. I've got to survive a little bit longer, get back to my feet, keep making her work. she's going to wear down. She can't keep this up. Seeing those mental battles and watching them go through that, I mean, that's what makes all of us love this sport. It's what keeps us coming back for more. But that fight had everything. It had this deep-seated hatred between two athletes, or what we perceived to be. Obviously, after the fight, we realized, hey, Joanna's got a ton of respect for Claudia. She wants Claudia to forgive her for the mind game she was playing. And it looked like Claudia really made the decision not to. Mm-hmm. All the storylines, all the technique. I mean, you can't ask for more in a fight than that. It was awesome.
Do you see a distinct difference between the quality of technique and strategy in, say, the women's strawweight division compared to women's bantamweight, where it seems like women's bantamweight in the UFC, the talent pool is so much smaller. It kind of feels at times like men's MMA from 2006 or so, whereas I don't think any fan of men's MMA would watch Jedrzejczyk versus Gadelha and think that the level of technique and strategy there was any less than any other division, if perhaps a little different.
And no doubt, there's more depth at strawweight, and because when they did that season of The Ultimate Fighter and they had all these women competing on there who had been fighting for a long time, many of them training with really well-known fighters and different coaches. Mm-hmm. It's just a deep division that has some really good technique in it. 135 is still a little bit sporadic. Yeah, you still got some people that can get by being really good at one thing and not all that well-rounded. And that's always typical of heavier weight classes. The heavier you go, the less well-rounded you need to be. You can get by on certain things. Look at the heavyweight and the light heavyweight division. They're nowhere near in comparison to welterweight and 155 pounds, how good and technical those weight classes are. So I think women's bantamweight is going to catch up, because what I always tell people is we have no idea who's in the gym right now, mm-hmm. who is a phenomenal athlete who said, you know what, I'm no longer going to pursue the Olympics. I'm not going to make any money doing this. These women are making some real money. Holly Holm, Miesha Tate, Ronda Rousey. They have all made, I venture a guess, well into the 7 figures if you total all the money they've made. And that's going to attract some athletes, because when they pursue other things, especially in women's sports where there's a massive pay disparity, they're going to be attracted to it. They're going to come out and they're going to want to try this. And so I think, quickly within 2 years, 135 pounds, the women's bantamweight division will catch up, and we'll see a lot of very well-rounded women there.
So one more follow-up on Jedrzejczyk and Gadelha. So given that fight was in the small cage, given that Gadelha had all that time to prepare, do you think that was Gadelha's best shot at her? I mean, do you think that if they were to fight for a third time, there would be things that Gadelha could do to make that fight closer than it was this time around?
I think that was the right strategy for her at the time. The only thing I would change is once you hit a certain number of takedown attempts, you got to stop. If I'm her corner, I'm literally going to time how much I'm going to time on a stopwatch. How often, how much time is Joanna spending with her back against the fence and her back on the floor? Once I get past the halfway point and I know, hey, we've got 3 solid minutes of control time, Claudia, stop looking for takedowns, stop exerting this much energy. You got to control this a little bit. Start working your jab and your own footwork a little bit more so you can catch your breath and keep a pace for 5 rounds. That's not easy to do. I say it like it's simple, but it's really, really hard to do. I tell athletes, and I do very little coaching, but I do some. I always tell them that it's going to be very tough if I'm going to recommend a fighter shoot more than 3 times in a round. Takedowns take the most energy by far, whether you complete them or not. When in not like a half, 50% takedown, but when you really shoot in and try and take someone down, mm-hmm. it takes a lot of energy. And if you're failing on it, many times when people go over 2 even, they start to gas out. They start to slow down in that round. They start to waste a lot of energy. And so that's the only thing that I could go and critique from Claudia is, where you clearly won the first 2 rounds, you cost yourself quite a bit. And if we could have saved a little bit from round 1 and round 2, we still would have won them. Then we could win round 3. Rounds 4 and 5 are going to be really difficult for her to win because she's never going to be able to defeat, or not never, but she was not going to defeat Joanna in a striking contest that night. She's not. I don't think she even wins one round if her primary objective is to go strike with her.
It seemed like there was kind of a gambit there, right? Because in their first fight, Gadelha actually won the third round by overwhelming Jedrzejczyk with wrestling. In this fight, she went so hard in the first two that she was pretty much done by a minute or two into the third.
Yeah, it's when you even train that in the gym, you can always do more in the gym than you can in the octagon. Oh, it's just a fact. The adrenaline, the lights, the pace, it's just different. But and when you do that much wrestling and you're holding people down that much, it exhausts your arms and your cardio for certain.
So things didn't work out too well for Claudia Gadelha, but one of her teammates had a phenomenal win. Jose Aldo came back from the most unexpected and brutal loss of his career against Conor McGregor back in December to rematch Frankie Edgar, who I think we all agree, and everyone in the community of MMA agrees, has been looking better than ever lately, and he put on just a grade A performance. Can you give us your thoughts on that fight?
Yeah, the first thing that stood out to me is Jose Aldo is obviously the much bigger guy, but he's also quicker. And Frankie's not a slow guy. He's a quick guy that overwhelms you in a lot of different areas. But Jose, being the quicker athlete, paid some dividends for him. The other thing that we know is that, for Frankie to really get into rhythm, he's such a well-rounded mixed martial artist. His style is dependent on being able to use all of his tools. His striking gets opened up by his wrestling gets opened up by his striking. His guard passing is opened up by his ground strikes. And so on and so forth, where that also feeds into his submission game. Everything works together. He's one of the most synchronized and well-integrated mixed martial artists on the planet. Jose Aldo was quicker than him, which made the striking aspect very difficult for Frankie. And then he was so much stronger. His takedown defense was
unreal.
It's always been excellent, but it was on a whole new level. I mean, nobody has ever, with one arm, just thrown Frankie Edgar to the floor. It was a very, very impressive performance by Jose Aldo. It was eye-opening. I did not expect him to be able to handle Frankie Edgar the way he did. Certainly, Frankie made the fight close because he's just nonstop. There's no quitting him. If he can't hit you with 2 punches, he'll throw 3. If he can't hit you with 3, he's going to throw 4. He's going to keep coming at you, and there's no quit in him. But Jose Aldo clearly controlled that fight and did what he wanted to do. I even had the feeling, it looked to me a little bit like Jose Aldo held back a little bit. He could have done more. I think that the one flaw in his game is that he's still concerned with getting very tired. He's still afraid of that a little bit. I think that limits his volume a little bit. It limits his combinations, where we don't see him as often as we'd like to throwing 3 and 4 and 5 strike combinations, where as fast as he is, when he chooses to do it, he's absolutely devastating. I mean, every punch and kick he lands, it almost makes you shiver a little bit. Like, holy cow, what is this guy? I think for him to go out and beat Conor McGregor and become the undisputed champion, I think he's going to have to do a little bit of that. He's not going to be able to sit back and rely on a guy like Frankie Edgar, who's going to come at you with so much and just be more of the counter striker for the bulk of the fight.
So having seen these two fight for 50 minutes total now, similar to the Jedrzejczyk-Gadelha situation, this was a rematch, and just like that, I think it felt a little more definitive than their first fight. This one even more so, because it really felt like Aldo's fight almost from the very beginning. Do you see anything in that matchup that could hint to a future success for Frankie Edgar, or does it just kind of feel to you like Jose Aldo has his number, that's the one guy in the division he can't beat?
It would seem like Jose has his number, but I mean, in that first fight, if you watch it back, I mean, you could definitely make the argument that Frankie won that fight. He's not being a whiner or complainer when he talks about that decision. I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say Jose has his number and Frankie can't win that fight. I definitely wouldn't. We all have off nights, and I don't think that was the best Frankie Edgar that we could have seen. I don't. I think he started throwing some of the same combinations over and over again and didn't go to some of his variety until later. He threw a couple of different kicks or whatnot, but I think he's got more. He's got more diversity in his game to throw. I think he could have chain wrestled a little bit more effectively. And now feeling some of Jose Aldo's defenses could have gone for some takedowns differently. Maybe forced some upper body clinches and gone for more Greco-Roman style wrestling than trying to get at Jose Aldo's legs to maybe take his hips out of the equation, at least in the initial clinching, in the initial entry. Jose was on in that fight, no doubt about it. Frankie wasn't as on. So I have learned in this sport as an analyst to never say never. So one thing you can't do, any fight that we think is just unwinnable, and then we get reminded that anything can happen there. And just when we think Frankie's all volume, he knocks out a guy with one punch like Chad Mendez, and certainly he connected in that fight. Definitely Jose Aldo is the better fighter. He won that fight clearly, but I can't close the door on Frankie's potential to beat him in another matchup.
So one of the things that was really striking about Aldo's performance was how good his footwork was and how efficient it was. Because to see a guy playing the outside game, forcing the other guy to come after him, usually if you're going to be sticking and moving on the outside, you're going to be the one who moves more. Yet there was a statistic in the third round of that fight that Frankie had moved half again as much as Aldo had, despite Aldo being the one who was being the evasive fighter. Like that, I mean, what do you think of Aldo's footwork? How has it gotten better? How is it even possible for it to have gotten better than it has over the last few years?
With him, it's not surprising. There was a while where I felt that Jose Aldo was actually the best athlete in the UFC, and I still would make that argument that he's probably top 3 at a minimum, top 5 best athlete in the UFC in terms of his ability to run fast, jump high, be flexible, do things that athletes do. I mean, he's at a very, very elite level. Elite level in terms of not just UFC, but any athlete on the planet. So it didn't surprise me at all that his footwork had improved that much. He trains at Nova União in a very, very small gym. There's not a whole lot of room to move there. And so we've typically seen him, Renan Barão, be more of your traditional Muay Thai, plodding forward, feet still kind of style. But since, Barão was dethroned by TJ Dillashaw, since people with footwork have started to give them trouble, I think we've seen some changes, some adaptation at a Nova União. So I'm not surprised that they've started to add to that. And I'm definitely not surprised that Jose Aldo was able to pick it up so well. He may not have even been shown how to move that efficiently. It may just come natural to him. He's one of those types of athletes that you show him a technique once, a guy like me, I've got to do it 1,000 times before I can pull that off against an elite level athlete at the UFC level. Jose Aldo showed to him once, he shrugs it off, he goes into sparring that day, smashes somebody with it immediately.
So my final question about Jose Aldo here, and a final question for our interview, has to do with Conor McGregor. You mentioned before, you sort of hinted at the approach you would like to see Aldo use in a rematch between those two men. I don't know if you saw, there were some pretty striking photos from UFC 200 that showed McGregor standing in the crowd in the first row watching Aldo and Edgar go at it. So obviously there is still some heat behind that fight, especially with Aldo having sort of reasserted himself as the best featherweight besides McGregor. So in full, what would you like to see from that rematch? What are the dynamics at play there, given what happened the first time around? And who, if anyone, do you feel has a stronger chance at winning?
Well, I mean, you have to still go back and give the edge to Conor McGregor just because of the mental side of it. Even though Conor lost to Nate Diaz, he is still a mentally an extremely strong fighter. He does do very well under pressure. He does thrive under those bright lights. He got over aggressive against Nate Diaz. He tried to knock him out too much, and he gassed, and that happens to guys. But he's going to learn from that. He's picked himself back up and gotten back on the horse. You've got to admire his ability to come out and perform when things matter most. And so I think I give him that edge with Jose Aldo. For Aldo, he's got to be more active. You can't just sit back and look to do just enough to win rounds against Conor McGregor. He's got to incorporate all of his attacks. He didn't leg kick very much against Frankie Edgar. He needs to do that against Conor McGregor. When Jose Aldo kicks your leg, some people, when they hit you the third time, it starts to impact you a little bit and bug you. Jose Aldo does that to you immediately, and it's a massive weapon. It breaks down the things that you rely on to move around, to set up your timing, to have great footwork and land good shots. He destroys those things when he decides to kick them. And so he needs to do more of that, more combinations. I think he needs to pressure a little bit, and he needs to look to take Conor down. Jose Aldo doesn't just have good jiu-jitsu. He's got world-class jiu-jitsu. He's got excellent, excellent grappling. He just chooses oftentimes not to use it. I think he's got to mix everything up on Conor McGregor, and we haven't seen him do that as much, since he fought Ricardo Lamas, where he took him down several times in that fight. He's got offensive wrestling. He just doesn't show it very often. I think he's got good enough wrestling to put Conor on his back and really create some scrambles. Neither guy has shown a great ability or given us a lot of confidence in to go 5 really hard rounds. Jose has more experience doing so. Conor obviously gassing out against Nate Diaz is going to continue to make people question him, although I think he comes in great shape. He just wasn't economical with his energy. But I still believe that Jose Aldo has a little bit of a concern for his output in getting that exhausted feeling and fighting through that. I think in that rematch, he should make it a point to come in the best shape of his life. He should be training, a pace for 5 rounds for that fight, even though he has potential to take anybody out early. But nothing takes away the power that, the big advantage Conor McGregor has is that big punching power because he's so big. Take it away. Force him to wrestle. Get him in the clinch. Make him defend takedowns. Wear his arms out a little bit. Put him on his back. Make him dig for underhooks and get back to his feet a little bit more. Do those types of things to him, and he's not going to be as big a threat to land that one big knockout punch. Although I would say when Jose Aldo throws combinations and he's more active and puts more volume on you, he's just as much a threat to knock you out as Conor McGregor is. So I think he has some of that as well.
Do you think there is anything to the notion that Conor McGregor is, you mentioned that he's not really afraid of anything. He obviously has insane mental confidence, bordering on actual insanity at times, it seems. Is there anything, however, to the notion that Conor McGregor has always been a guy who looks for bigger challenges? If you look back through his resume, he has never actually defended a title that he's won. Always, in this one, he won the featherweight belt, immediately wanted to go to lightweight, and then went to welterweight to fight Nate Diaz when that fight with Dos Anjos fell through. So do you think that adds any extra dimension to this fight, that this will effectively be, should McGregor fight Aldo, the first title defense of his career, the first time he will be fighting someone who he has already fought and dominated a second time?
It is always a factor. No fighters like rematches when you're the one who won, especially when you won decisively. Right? If you I'd rather fight a guy that I went to war with but won than have to fight another guy that I knocked out right away in the first round. I mean, Conor walks into a situation where he has nothing to gain. You can't do it any better. Mm-hmm. You can't do it any better. So all the pressure is on him. Jose Aldo can come in with much less. He's already had to walk a mile in the shoes and go back to Brazil having lost to Conor McGregor in mere seconds. He's done that already. It can't get any worse. If he loses to him again, okay, nothing changes. You lost to him before. It can only get better as long as he can make it more competitive. So I think it's definitely a factor. I think it's one of the few remaining mental challenges Conor McGregor is going to have in this sport after he rematches Nate Diaz.
Well, thank you very much, Brian. We have to sincerely thank you for joining us again. We'll hope you do so again in the future. It's always a pleasure to hear your thoughts and your insights on the fighters.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks so much for having me. It's always a lot of fun talking to you guys. Great question, great book all around. I love how much detail you guys put into your work. You really care. You care about the athletes, and that's really important in my book as someone who still considers himself a fighter. I really appreciate that. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for coming on, Brian.
Anytime, guys.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it. And we are back. A big thank you again to Brian Stann. Always a pleasure to talk to that man, wouldn't you say, Pat?
Absolutely, yeah. Just one of the best dudes in all of MMA.
I don't know why my voice sounded so unenthusiastic when I said that. I think it's
Yeah, I don't know.
because
I felt like I needed to inject enough enthusiasm for the both of us there.
I was very genuine, and somehow, as it came out, I was like, I sound like I'm being sarcastic right now. I love Brian Stann. That's one of my favorite guys to interview in the sport, so I'm serious. It is always a pleasure to talk to Brian Stann. Something's wrong with me, Pat. I'm a sociopath. Speaking of crazy people, Robbie Lawler's fighting this weekend. And I think there's a lot to be said about Robbie Lawler. He's in a weird position now where, and even a friend of mine who doesn't watch MMA that much said, every time I see Robbie Lawler fight, I'm shocked that he's still champion. That's kind of how Robbie Lawler's fights have gone lately. Every single one is an epic war where he has to rally and come back to defend his title. Robbie Lawler does not feel like a dominant champion. He feels like one of those... I've talked a lot about the difference between getting to a title and keeping a title. Robbie Lawler is the only guy I can think of who has, in a way, kept the getting to a title style of fight and yet maintained a title with it.
Yeah, he's evolving, and he's getting older. Like the fact that Lawler has been able to was able to win a title this deep into his career. He was what 13 and a half years into his professional career when he won the title. He was 31, 32 years old when he won the title. Like the fact that he has been able to then defend that belt twice more after that is pretty incredible. Like this is one of the all-time great MMA accomplishments. But it seems pretty clear after the last couple of fights to me that Lawler is kind of on the downswing. The fact that he's still winning fights speaks to how fucking awesome Robbie Lawler is.
Of course.
But at the same time, like the decline is ongoing, and it manifests itself in a couple of specific ways.
Yeah, so we wanted to compare Robbie for reference to another fighter whose decline you and I both believe began before people really started talking about it. That's Anderson Silva. And the thing with Anderson, now we can really see in Anderson's fights all the things that troubled him as a fighter. We can also see all the things that made him brilliant despite declining. They're still there, but the decline has worsened. And so, for example, in that Michael Bisping fight, we can see that Anderson was tired, that he didn't have the energy to force himself to fight for an entire round, even at most points, where he had to really take a lot of time off between attacks and let himself recuperate. We saw in the Chris Weidman fight, the first one, that his durability has gone down, but also that perhaps his ability to pull the trigger quickly on counters has decreased. But these are not necessarily things that just happened in those fights. I think you and I both agree that the Stephan Bonner fight showed a fairly clearly declined Anderson Silva. I think the first Chael Sonnen fight was not a great look for him. And I think you can go back all the way probably to his fight with Damian Maia and possibly even before and see this is a guy who is getting tired, who is showboating more than he's actually getting things done, and who is relying on his aura and his natural talent and his finishing ability to stun opponents that might actually be able to beat him if they saw through the facade.
Yeah, you have to. What separates all-time great fighters like Anderson Silva, and now I think pretty clearly Robbie Lawler too, from the rest of the pack is that they make a virtue of necessity, right? So the necessity is getting tired more easily, not being able to fight at a quick pace for all 5 rounds. Like we have seen a decrease in volume from Lawler over his last 2 fights, and we saw the burst thing even before that. We saw the burst thing in the second Hendricks fight, where the last time we saw him fight 5 full rounds at a consistent measured pace all the way throughout was the Matt Brown fight, and then and also the first Hendricks fight before that. He fought at pretty much the same pace in every round. Now he's fighting in bursts, and this is what we saw from Anderson Silva too, is you start to fight in bursts. You pick and choose your spots. Now, if you're skilled enough, you can make that work to your advantage. You can let your opponent throw a whole bunch of kind of piddling strikes the way that Carlos Condit did, and then you pick and choose your spots to land the brutal counters, to flurry, to engage in those insane bursts of violence that can win rounds or finish your opponent outright. But that comes with the cost, and the cost is that you're going to give away rounds. Like he would have lost Lawler would have lost a decision to Rory McDonald had he not finished him in the fifth round.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a miracle. Like it is the largest disparity in significant strikes ever for a winning fighter in Lawler's win over Condit.
Yeah. And not only do you give away rounds, I think because we have Robbie Lawler fighting Tyron Woodley, I know it's a title shot many people are displeased with, and I understand that. Woodley has been inactive for so long, just sitting on his hopes for a title shot. Inexplicably, almost, Dana White and the UFC brass said, all right, we're going to give it to him, even though they've never been keen to keep their promises in the past. But the reality is that Tyron Woodley is extremely quick and explosive, very, very powerful, and is a real knockout puncher. And so when you fight a guy like that with Robbie Lawler's current style, you risk not only giving away rounds, but as you become a fighter who waits for single opportunities to exploit, you give your opponent more time to find the same. And Tyron Woodley, with that kind of power, that kind of speed and precision, and some pretty good defense to go along with it, he's a guy who can capitalize on little opportunities probably almost as well as Lawler, just by virtue of his natural attributes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like it's hard to overstate how talented Woodley is in terms of in terms of speed and power. Like he may be the best athlete in the welterweight division, which is a division that's packed with great athletes. Like that division from top to bottom is stacked with dudes who have incredible physical gifts, starting with Lawler. I mean, the fact that like Lawler has always been an incredible athlete, and even now when he's pretty clearly past his athletic prime, is still one of the quickest, fastest, hardest punchers in that whole division. So, yeah, I mean, and that's really Woodley's chance here, is that Woodley could knock Robbie Lawler out. Like that's a thing that could happen. We've seen Lawler get buzzed in quite a few fights in the recent past. We've seen him put on rubber legs. And if you get caught flush by Woodley, Woodley can and will put you to sleep.
I mean, if you're going to eat a clean shot from one of these three, Carlos Condit, Rory McDonald, Tyron Woodley, in my opinion, Woodley's going to be the one most likely to put you away with that one shot. Now, maybe he doesn't have the craft of Rory McDonald in setting it up. Maybe he doesn't have the volume of Carlos Condit to help make disguise those shots. But if we're talking raw power against an increasingly inactive Robbie Lawler, then I think that I have the sickening feeling, Pat, that Tyron Woodley is going to be the man to finally dethrone Brutal Bob. And I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to pick Lawler in this fight.
Yeah.
I'll give away my pick right now. I'm going to pick him because I think that he has the craft. I think that that he's a smart dude and he's surrounded by smart people in his training camp. He's working with the main ATT camp for this one, and it's Woodley who's going elsewhere. I think they should be able to maybe work around some of those flaws for a little bit longer. I don't know if they'll be able to do it forever. But they know Woodley. Lawler sparred with him. They know him. I think they should be able to come up with something. The knockout is a real distinct possibility, and so too is it needs to be mentioned. Woodley has gotten substantially better over the years.
Yeah.
Like Woodley has made serious improvements to his game. He's not just an athletic dude. He does have some craft, and we don't know exactly how much he will have added because we haven't seen him fight in a year and a half, and he broke his foot in his last fight. So it's hard to know exactly what to expect from Woodley in this fight. It wouldn't at all be surprising if he came out and won it. But I think until we really see Brutal Bob's chin go for good, I kind of have to pick him by default.
Yeah, that's the thing, man. He doesn't. Tyron Woodley is, for all intents and purposes, a one-handed fighter. He uses both hands, but mostly he throws the right. And even as he has improved, that's all there is to it. I want to say that Robbie Lawler is good enough to avoid that kind of attack. I want to say that Robbie Lawler, even when hurt, is, and I think this is true, one of the best survivors and retaliators in MMA right now. Robbie Lawler is so difficult to finish. Not just because he has great defense and because he stays really calm under pressure, but because he will look for an opportunity to put you away while you're trying to finish him off. And so most smart fighters don't want to run into that wood chipper, and they don't, so they let him back into the fight. Yeah, I don't know. part of me is tempted to pick Tyron Woodley here, just because so many of my picks are. I feel I kind of chicken out and pick the guy who past fights suggest should win. I really don't want to pick against Robbie Lawler, Pat. I really don't want to.
I mean, let me provide.
Let's talk about the matchup.
Let me provide more of a reason than just the until I see something else. Let me provide good technical reasons why Robbie Lawler should win this fight. The current version of Lawler is the best defender of takedowns I think I've seen in a fight, aside from maybe Jose Aldo. Like the sprawls that he was hitting on Rory McDonald were something I've never seen. Like
they were like knockout sprawls. Like if your head was under his hips when he sprawled in your shot, you would be knocked unconscious.
Yeah, I mean the level of athleticism, speed, strength, and sheer technical acumen that he showed in stuffing those takedowns was out of this world, and his ability to hurt you both as you're shooting the takedowns, while you're trying to chain wrestle with him, and in the immediate aftermath, like he's going to make you pay for those shots. I don't know that Woodley can win a pure striking matchup on a technical basis with Robbie Lawler unless he lands a knockout punch. And let's take seriously the idea that Lawler's chin is still there, and that he still has that recoverability. It won't be there forever, but at least for now, let's assume that it is. In the absence of a knockout punch, if Woodley can't wrestle with him, do we really think that he can win a 5-round striking matchup with a guy who has the quality of footwork, kind of subtle defense, and finishing ability of Robbie Lawler? I think the answer still has to be no.
Of course not. No.
Acknowledging all those other factors, like at the basis of it, this is a wrestle boxer who needs to wrestle against a guy who can stuff takedowns and knock you out on the feet, right?
Sure, but it's like, to me, it's a really strong puncher's chance. It's not only that Robbie Lawler is seemingly more easy to hurt than he was earlier in his career, a little less durable, but also that he is easy to hit. That defense, a lot of times now, there's a certain sort of technical de-evolution in the game of Robbie Lawler, where he's not really showing all of his tools, and I have to wonder how much he's working on them. If it's just a factor of stamina, or if maybe he really isn't honing his techniques in the same way he was when he first came to ATT. When we see him fight someone like Carlos Condit, and I swear to God he doesn't throw a single jab for 3 rounds, and only when he goes into instinctive seek and destroy mode in the 5th round does he start jabbing at Carlos Condit. When the jab is one of his best weapons, I have to wonder where Robbie Lawler's at right now. And if that kind of Robbie Lawler comes in against Tyron Woodley, one who doesn't throw much or who is predictable when he does, that is a prime opportunity for a Woodley counterpunch. I agree with you that the only way Woodley really wins this fight is with a knockout. I think Woodley, although I think the talk of him gassing has been vastly overstated, you don't want to be Tyron Woodley in the 5th round with Robbie Lawler. I think the longer this fight goes, the chances that Robbie Lawler gets a knockout win go up drastically. But I think Tyron Woodley's chances of landing that big counter or lacing Robbie Lawler with that big right hand early in the fight and being the first guy to actually make that count, the first guy to finish him with that shot because of his punching power, I think those chances are pretty high. And so that's why I question this fight, is that it is a puncher's chance in a sense. It's you got to knock him out to beat him. But I can't think of many guys in this division right now who stand a better chance of doing that so quickly and emphatically as Woodley.
Yeah, so the problem when you're fighting a guy who's as fast and as powerful as Tyron Woodley is there's always an adjustment period, right? Like it's going to take you. We saw this when Carlos Condit fought Tyron Woodley before the knee injury. Like the first round with Woodley is just, I mean, you are walking a tightrope above a pit filled with great white sharks, alligators, and Nile crocodiles.
Right.
You know, like, because he's so fast and hits so hard, and like, it's just it's hard to get your distance against a guy that fast because he can cover it so quickly. It's hard to know where you're safe. But eventually you'll get it. Like, so if Woodley's going to win this fight, I think it's going to have to be early, because you can't let a fighter as experienced as Robbie Lawler get your timing and get your distance. Because it doesn't matter how fast you are, if the other guy can time you, and if you don't have a wide variety of creative setups, and at this point it still seems fair to say that Woodley doesn't, like, eventually eventually he will get your timing. Lawler can get anybody's timing given enough time. But it's going to be a matter of surviving that first round. So, do you think if you're Robbie Lawler and you're game planning for this fight, do you want to come out hot like you did against Johnny Hendricks and try and blitz him in the first 45 seconds or so?
I don't know. Like part of that makes sense to keep Tyron Woodley from taking control of the fight, and then he starts nowhere and it gets worse as the fight goes on. But also, Woodley's a pretty good counterpuncher. That's actually one of the things he does really well, because he's got such great timing and he's so quick with that right hand. He keeps it on a hair trigger. So do you want to be Robbie Lawler, who needs an adjustment period for this super fast guy, and come out and get caught by something you don't see because you're trying to teach him a lesson? I mean, do you want to be Jose Aldo against Conor McGregor, but more so because it's Robbie Lawler and not Jose Aldo? I don't know. It's a tough thing. I struggle to see how Robbie Lawler can be like 60% safe from that punch at any point in the first round or two. Before he gets that adjustment. Even Roy McDonald needed a period of adjustment for Tyron Woodley, and he was backing Woodley up to the fence from the very beginning of that fight, but he still needed a period of adjustment to get used to the speed, to get used to the right kick and the right hand. It's crazy because I know that Robbie Lawler has so much more technical depth than Tyron Woodley. Even in his crazy round 5 blitzes, he shows more than Tyron Woodley does over the course of a whole 3-round fight, but I also know that Tyron Woodley's not that easy to hit, and he may not throw much, but that kind of works for him because it increases his chances of being able to land a knockout punch as the fight goes on, especially against Lawler, who, even with a crazy first round, is probably not going to be punishing him consistently en route to that 5th round. So, it's the fact that Robbie fights in bursts, the fact that he's not only more hittable but more hurtable now, and I know that Tyron Woodley's a smart guy. I think Tyron Woodley, these are both two very intelligent fighters, but you've spoken to Robbie Lawler in the past. We've both spoken to Tyron Woodley. Both guys are going to come in here with some specific things prepared. How well either of them can capitalize on that, I think at this point is increasingly a factor of their athletic potential. And we have to say that Tyron Woodley has more of that right now than Robbie Lawler. At some point, we are going to see not just the signs of decline that I think we've already witnessed, but a precipitous drop-off for Robbie Lawler. And just because I have this sickening gut feeling, I think I'm going to pick Tyron Woodley. I'm going to go for it. Why not? Because I always make a safe pick. So
I'm gonna stick with Lawler because I think knowing that you're going to be in a 5-round fight and understanding how to use 5 rounds to your advantage are very different things. And I think that, again, I really think that Lawler has what it takes to survive the early going against Woodley. Honestly, if it were me, I would come out hot. I would try and come after Woodley at the very, very beginning of the fight, and I would try and clinch with. I'm sorry?
Put him in that defensive shell.
Yeah, I would try and do almost exactly what he did to Hendricks in their second fight. Get him in the clinch and just knee the shit out of his body for the first 30 seconds of the fight.
Makes a lot of sense.
Then take the rest of the first round off, circle at range, know that you've probably won that with that burst, and then kind of let the fight play out from there. But you've got to work the body. You got to land 10 or 15 shots to the body to accelerate the process of Woodley gassing.
Yeah, and with that Condit fight, I'm just not even sure that Lawler can do that anymore. Robbie Lawler seems to me this guy who is just I don't think his coaches and trainers have any idea what he's going to do when he goes in the cage. You know what I mean? He's always been this sort of riding the momentum of the fight, making split-second decisions. That's always been his thing. And I really got the sense in that Carlos Condit fight, and maybe I'm drawing too much from just one fight, but I really got the sense there that he wasn't doing what his corner was wanting him to do, what they were asking of him between rounds. He was going out there and doing basically nothing round after round and just hoping for one big shot. And if your coaches can't get you to do that, I don't know, man. And maybe it was the volume of Condit that really shut him down and made him reluctant, or made him think he had a lot of counter opportunities. And so maybe against a guy like Woodley, he's going to be able to throw more because Woodley doesn't throw that much. But
Do you think there's also an extent to which you and I are understating the difficulty of fighting at pace with Carlos Condit?
Oh, probably.
Maybe we're not giving Condit like we talk a lot about Condit's unorthodoxy and how and kind of in theory how difficult that is to deal with. Maybe we're not giving Lawler enough credit for coming up with a perfectly rational response to somebody who's going to fight that way.
Well, yeah, he's a very tactical guy. Like, I think if he sees something and he's like, all right, I can't deal with this, he's going to sit there and calculate and try to find another way around it. Now, whether waiting for one big shot is the right solution, I don't know, but you can definitely understand why fighting Condit would be different than fighting Woodley in that sense.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, you're fighting a tall guy, a guy who uses his reach really well. Is like I can see how if you're Robbie Lawler, you think, man, I don't know if I even need to jab. He's going to throw all this shit at me. I know exactly where he is anyway. Like I understand the reasoning, even if obviously when we finally saw Lawler go to the jab, it worked better than not jabbing. But like I understand, I think why he did the things that he did in that fight, even if it wasn't perfect. And I think that maybe some of the advice his corner was giving him, maybe he made the better decisions, you know?
Who knows? I mean, a similar thing happened in the Hendricks fight where Hendricks was showing him a ton of volume, and Lawler was spending so much time defending and trying to pick off those shots as they came in that he couldn't let go with his counters the way he did in the first fight. Hendricks had really improved his striking, and that gave him problems. Those two are his lowest volume fights, and the Hendricks rematch and the Condit fight, and Woodley is very obviously a different opponent. But I for some reason, I don't feel confident that that's the reason. That only because of the volume of his opponents did Robbie Lawler shut down. Maybe, and I hope so. I would love to see Robbie Lawler keep putting together a few more defenses. I would love to see Robbie Lawler keep being a dominant champion who holds his belt. But it's just a fight pick. So I picked Woodley. I'm going to stick with it. That way I'll get to look really smart if it happens, and everyone will forget about it in a week if I'm wrong. It is what it is.
Therein, you have grasped the incentive structure of the fight predictor.
Yeah, basically that's the way it works. I just this is really a gut pick. You know, like I have a feeling, and that's not a good way to measure these things. It isn't, and I often find myself combating those. But it's often because I feel compelled to pick the safe guy, the guy who should win, that I end up not seeing a lot of upsets coming. And so I'm going to go for it this time. I really think Tyron Woodley, too powerful, too quick. Decision is not his kind of territory, but I think basically through the first 3 rounds of the fight, he carries more than enough power and pop to catch Robbie Lawler sleeping or waiting for a chance. And I think at this point, he may be the more destructive one-shot puncher, one-punch knockout artist than Robbie Lawler, or he's at least equal. And given what we've seen, I think he's the more durable one, and the one more capable of snapping that trap shut in a split second. So I'm going with Tyron Woodley. We'll see. I hope I'm wrong, Pat. I really do. I love Bob Lawler. I love him. Damn it. I want to see him keep winning.
Well, and you're going to.
All right, I'm glad you said that. Yeah, you're giving me hope against my own gut feelings. But why don't we take a quick break? When we come back, we have other fights to discuss, more promising ones. We have Rose Namajunas versus Karolina Kowalkiewicz, a fight that I am very much looking forward to, one with a lot more upside for both ladies, and probably the number one contenders fight to find the next woman to challenge Joanna Jedrzejczyk. Big things happening in the women's strawweight division. We will break it all down after this. Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are 1 or 2 of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show. And we are back as promised. Rose Namajunas versus Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Is it Kowalkiewicz or Kowalkiewicz?
I always thought it was Kowalkiewicz, but I trust the man himself. John Anik, who said Kowalkiewicz.
Okay, we'll go with that. John always does a good job of asking the fighters how to say their names, so we'll go with that. Kowalkiewicz, Karolina Kowalkiewicz, the second Polish women's strawweight in the UFC. Perhaps because of the Joanna connection or something, I think people are really looking forward to seeing her fight Jedrzejczyk. But personally, Pat, I don't really feel that this is a favorable matchup for her. I kind of had a hard time seeing her win.
Yeah, I agree with that. There are a lot of people and smart people who seem to be giving Kowalkiewicz a lot better chance in this fight than I am, frankly, going in, because the big story of this fight is the physical mismatch. That Kowalkiewicz, it works at a great pace. She's got a nice mobile striking game. Her volume is something to behold when she gets going. Just a steady stream of strikes as the fight wears on. And that I could see giving Namajunas problems. Namajunas is not somebody who wants to fight at a great pace. But if you're the bigger, stronger, infinitely faster fighter who knows how to impose your size and reach with a long jab and straight punches, it takes a lot of that pace out of the running. Mm-hmm. Especially for somebody like Kowalkiewicz, who generates volume through clever tricks like stance switching and shift punches. Mm-hmm. Like that is going to work that's going to work a lot worse against somebody who knows how to move their feet, who knows how to backstep punch and get out of the pocket. And those are all things that Namajunas does well. And
someone who knows how to counter jab. I mean, that was the big thing for Namajunas against Torres. The fact that when her corner demanded it of her, she was answering every onrush with a jab. And Kowalkiewicz is far more hittable than Tecia Torres. I think more predictable in her movements. Kowalkiewicz is one of those classic unathletic grinders, kind of. She really does not compare to Namajunas. She's not on the same plane as Namajunas in terms of athleticism. Whether you're talking power, speed, coordination, stamina is the one thing that she has, and we've often said that's kind of the consolation prize of the hard worker. A lot of unathletic people, in the sense of fast twitch muscle fibers, athleticism, a lot of those people, they get good stamina if they really want to win fights because they work hard enough to get good stamina. Almost anyone can acquire good stamina with hard work. Obviously, there's a natural predisposition there for some people, but Kowalkiewicz is kind of the classic Michael Bisping. And so, coming into this fight, I don't think she's ever been in a bout where she's had such a huge disparity of not only athletic ability, but Namajunas is a genuinely very skilled fighter. One who is rapidly becoming more skilled with time. Her boxing has gotten better by miles under Trevor Whitman. Her jab is fantastic. Her footwork, as you said, has gotten better. Her clinch wrestling has become a really strong part of her game. And obviously her submission game has always been excellent, but nowadays it seems even better because it's less risky. Namajunas is no longer the woman who jumps for flying arm bars, though she will go for a creative trick now and then. She, against Paige Van Zandt, showed the ability to float on top of her opponent while looking for safe ways to go for submissions without sacrificing position. And so against Kowalkiewicz, my God, against Kowalkiewicz, I kind of fail to see a single phase where Karolina has a real strength. The one thing I can see, and we can talk about this, is a mental edge for Kowalkiewicz, is an emotional edge, perhaps. I think that Kowalkiewicz has shown that she, time and again, how well she deals with adversity. She is not a woman to be cowed when her opponent takes a round off of her or hits her with a hard shot. She keeps coming. She does change up her tactics. She, for example, I think in her UFC debut, who did she fight there? She fought
Randa Marcos.
Randa Marcos, and she switched to a kick-heavy game plan after failing to land with her hands in the first round and went to more knees and kicks, and that became a really good adjustment for her. She can do that kind of thing. Whereas I think Rose feels a lot more internal pressure going into fights like this. Ones where the brass say to her, okay, if you win this fight, you're getting a title shot. I think that was part of what caused her last fight with Tecia Torres to be a lot closer than you and I thought it would be. We both thought it would be a very competitive fight, but it was one that a lot of people thought Torres won, and I can absolutely see a case for it. It was a razor-thin contest, and even Namajunas herself seemed to acknowledge afterward that she felt a ton of pressure going into that fight. She was very emotional and had trouble kind of being consistent because of the implications of the bout. The fact that she fought Torres once before, the fact that this was kind of the proving ground for her improvement as a fighter, that kind of stuff seems to get to her in a way that it doesn't get to Kowalkiewicz. So do you think that could play a role in this fight?
I do, and so let's think about the exact way in which that could play out. I think that plays out in the way that Namajunas could get sucked into fighting Kowalkiewicz's kind of fight. Mm-hmm. I think that if she lets her discipline wane, if she lets Kowalkiewicz's volume get to her, Kowalkiewicz is going to throw a shitload of strikes. We know this, right? Mm-hmm. Like she's going to try and get in Rose's face and throw just 3-punch combination after 3-punch combination, and then try and dive into the clinch a little bit, throw a couple elbows, and get out. Like this is what Kowalkiewicz is going to try and do. And I can see a scenario in which an emotional Rose Namajunas consents to fight at that pace, and ends up landing the more impactful shots. But while she wins the battles, she loses the war. That you get to the end of a round and Kowalkiewicz's face is busted up, but she's landed 25 or 30 more strikes than Namajunas has over the course of the round, you know? Mm-hmm. And especially if it turns out that they get into the clinch and Namajunas can't take her down, which is a possibility. Kowalkiewicz has extraordinary takedown defense, and is really, really good at sneaking in knees and elbows in the clinch. If I can see that scenario happening, like that to me is Namajunas' path to a loss here. So if she's going to win this fight, she needs to stay disciplined. She needs to consciously slow the pace of the fight to one that she's more comfortable at. She needs to work at a distance where she's more comfortable. She's going to need to stick and move on the outside. And then when she gets into the clinch, don't fuck around there. Hit your takedowns and if you can't, get out. Like, don't stick around in the clinch and let Kowalkiewicz knee and elbow you and land those kind of pitter-patter shots to wear you down and score.
Yeah, I'm with all of that. And the things, I think Rose has the ability to do that. And I don't think there will be the same kind of external pressure on her, or I guess internal pressure. Kowalkiewicz is going to put pressure on Rose, but Rose is probably not going to be putting as much pressure on herself as she did in the Torres fight. Now, again, we didn't see it coming in the Torres fight, so you never know where her head is at. But I think one of the most interesting things with Namajunas and what kept her head above water in that fight with Torres, the rematch with Torres, is the development of her coach and the abilities of Trevor Whitman. I think it's really interesting to watch Whitman's style of coaching change as he gains more experience, and also change to suit his fighters. Because Trevor Whitman he's always been a very cheerful guy, Trevor Whitman. But his in-corner attitude is decidedly different for Namajunas than it is for others. I don't want to say he babies her, but he kind of goes Greg Jackson with her. The way Greg Jackson does with, like John Jones, fighters who he wants to stay calm and control their energy and not go too crazy. He's always like, if you recall in the Torres fight, he was constantly shouting, "Beautiful, the fundamentals are killing her, Rose. The fundamentals are dominating her right now." All kinds of stuff like that. Very complimentary, very calm in the corner. He was just like telling her what a great job she was doing. I think that kind of stuff really works for Namajunas. And that was kind of the difference between, even more so than the technique, between the first fight she had with Torres and the second one. Because, in the first fight, Namajunas absolutely did what you are saying here. She fought Torres' fight. She went at Torres' pace, and she couldn't keep it up. And against Torres the second time, she was a lot more consistent. Not as consistent as we expected her to be, but she kept her jab out there. She measured her distance. She went through some adversity in the first round and came back from it and calmed down. So I think that is a really big advantage in Namajunas' corner that will help her to overcome what is probably a slight mental disadvantage at a base level. So I'm picking Rose Namajunas here.
Yeah, I'm picking Namajunas too. Over the course of this segment, I have talked myself into this being a closer fight than I initially thought it was. Because I think it's hard to maintain, like one of the hardest things to do in combat sports, period, but I think especially in MMA where you have more ways to wear yourself out, is to maintain a consistent pace.
Yeah.
Like that is incredibly difficult to do. We talked about that on last week's episode with Lando Venata, and I talked to Lando himself about that, but like that is the hardest thing for a young fighter to learn how to do, especially when you have the kind of finishing ability that a dynamic fighter like Rose Namajunas has, where you think, if I just poured on a little more, I can finish him. Yeah. I can finish him. It's hard, and it's hard to square that with your self-confidence and your belief in your abilities and your belief in your gas tank to think that, nope, you know what? I need to be realistic. I need to dial it back. Like that is an incredibly difficult thing to do. So if Namajunas can do that here, if she can do that against Karolina Kowalkiewicz,
Kowalkiewicz. I think we decided on the first one.
Against Kowalkiewicz, if she can do that against her, she can do it against anybody in the division, and that would be a huge feather in her cap. So I too am taking Rose. I think by a competitive but clear decision.
Yeah, and I think that issue with not going too crazy for the finish, like I think she kind of did in the Carla Esparza fight, we already saw some improvement in that by the time she fought Paige Van Zandt. I mean, that fight, too, was a lot of Whitman in the corner and Barry much calmer than he was in the Esparza fight, which is great for her. Much less hectic, because I don't think that really helps Rose out in her performances. But her corner was all about staying calm and letting the finish happen. And she talked about that as being a big thing, that she had to focus in training and during the fight on not getting frustrated that Van Zandt was still around. Because I think that really happened in the Esparza fight. She wasn't having the effect she thought she would, and it all fell apart. I think she's better at that now. I think she's better at that enough to fight someone like Kowalkiewicz, who's kind of similar to Van Zandt in the amount of pressure, but better schooled in the way that she keeps her distance and punches her way out on angles. So it's going to be a slight step up from the Van Zandt fight, but one that I expect the result to be more or less the same. And I think that just about does it for today's episode. Do we have anything else that you want to plug for this week, Pat? I know we're recording this early, so anything that you haven't already talked about?
Yeah, I mean, so I'll have a preview of the UFC 201 card. I will have a piece for the Washington Post on Robbie Lawler and the ways in which he's aged like a fine Bordeaux. And then I think I'll have something on the logic of the UFC's $4 billion sale, like in what precise ways the UFC is worth $4 billion.
And I think it's going to be a non-week for me as far as articles. I'm going to be on vacation.
Ooh, so, look at you, fancy pants. Where are you going?
Charleston, South Carolina. Should I say that on the show? Someone's going to track me down.
Yeah, no, you should absolutely say it. Enjoy Charleston. It's going to be beautiful.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to it. If you see me in Charleston, don't kill me, but I'll sign an autograph. I know everyone out there is clamoring for a Conor Ruebusch signature on their collectibles and things of that nature. So should be fun. Looking forward to getting some time off, not writing about MMA for a week, and then coming back re-energized. Going to be nice. Otherwise, I think that's just about it. If you guys want to get in touch with us, you can do that on social media. You can find Pat at Patrick_Wyman. I am at Boxing Bush, BUSCH. You can also find me on Facebook, facebook.com/Conor Ruebusch MMA. And if you have any other questions or concerns, you can also go send me an email, boxingbush@gmail.com. And you should also go to our Patreon, check that out. We just put out another call for questions from our patrons. If you are a $5 patron or up, you get a guaranteed heavy bag question answered on the show. So we put out a call for another round of those. And $20 patrons get a whole topic segment that they get to decide. So if you are one of those people, then go ahead, check that out, and give us your ideas for questions. If you're not one of those people, perhaps I've just tempted you into becoming one. We look forward to having you as part of the crew. And if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.